I feel like a teacher up here for some reason. Look, we're in the middle of this coaching search that's been consuming all of our time for the last week and a half or so, and I don't have a lot of comments on it. I'm not going to talk about any individual candidates. We're early in that process. We've had a few Zoom interviews, and we'll have a few more. But with that, if you guys have, so one of the things that's a result of that is that we haven't spent a lot of time reflecting upon the last season. We haven't gone through our player evaluations yet. So I know you're going to have a lot of questions, some of which I can't really answer.
Mickey, how's that process work? Like, who's all involved in it, and kind of how are you guys running the search?
Yeah, we've got look, we've got most of our football people in it. Michael Parrington, Jeff, myself, Kai, Dave Ziegler, and Randy are also involved. They're former general managers. They have a lot of experience in our league, and so it's really that group of people that are going through the details and the process with me.
We've never been able to ask you this because I think it happened after camp. But how did Dave and Randy just fit into like the overall global picture? Like, what are their roles kind of within the team? Like,
yeah, look, they're talented, experienced people. Dave was with New England for a good period of time, and then with the Raiders for a shorter period of time. He's got a lot of experience. Comes from a different line, I guess is the right way to describe it, than the rest of us. Randy, you guys know that I've known him for a long, long time. He's had experience, and look, they're doing all kinds of things for us, and I really value their viewpoint.
Can you talk about, maybe this is the first time I think fans have heard from you, we've heard from you in a while, just kind of maybe the state of the organization, firing Dennis, looking for a new coach? Is it a rebuild? Is it a restructure? Just kind of where you all are as an organization right now.
Yeah, I think, look, that's part of what, part of what we haven't done yet is really look back and evaluate where we're at from a personnel standpoint. Obviously, this was a tough season, not what we expected. What jumps out is the amount of injuries, and we've got to do a deep dive into that. Are there things that are preventable? Are there things that we missed in the evaluation process, for example? So all that is work that needs to be done. I'm not a big, I think that you can, rebuild it means different things to different people. I think that you can turn around a season pretty quickly in the NFL. We've seen it with other teams, and there's a lot of good things on our roster, and there's some things that we need to adjust and fill in. Part of that is going to be the viewpoint and the vision that the new head coach has. So there's a lot of questions there I can't answer.
Do you feel like more change is needed than you even felt, though, 12 months ago? You kind of had a pretty defiant air last year that things weren't that bad, but then obviously after a 5-12 season, does that change?
Look, I'm positive. I'm glass half full at all times. I see a lot of things. Even in a 5-12 season, I see a lot of things that were positive that we can build on. So I'm on the side of, man, this thing can go the other direction pretty quickly.
And so when you say some of that will have to do with the head coach, obviously when you're interviewing these candidates, if one candidate was like, I would kind of prefer to catch up on the salary cap for a year and maybe draft some players and build a nucleus, and another one was like, I'd like to try to win 10 games this year with Derek Carr. Yeah. You're open to both ideas at this point, or that may influence which coach you like?
No, I think that one of the things that's really important is to be able to have a collective vision and be on the same page organizationally. Ownership, GM, coach, coaches, personnel department. We have to have the same collective vision. And we'll get to that. all of these candidates are going to have strengths and weaknesses, and we've got our strengths and weaknesses and blind spots, and so we just have to go through that and figure out, and we will, who the best fit is for us.
Dennis Allen said on a podcast that it seemed to indicate that like you weren't in favor of his firing. Speaking to that collective like decision, were you and Dale aligned on that? And is there any-
You know what, I don't want to get into that other than, look, it was an organization decision, and I'm part of the organization.
Part of that positivity you mentioned was pretty firmly standing behind Dennis last year in January.
Mhm.
So do you regret any of those statements?
No,
now?
I don't regret any of it. Dennis Allen's a really good football coach. Yeah, so I don't regret any of that.
You said last year that you and Sean Payton made a good team because he thought you were too patient and you thought he wasn't patient enough. After 4 years of not going to the playoffs, are you getting more impatient?
I think I'm still pretty patient. You know, I understand that, look, the results are the results, and you can't ignore the results. But you also have to look beyond the results sometimes and understand the reasons behind the symptoms. And some are in our control, some aren't. And so, look, we have to do the best job we can with the things that are in our control, and we have to understand the things that aren't. And look, I know you guys, nobody wants to hear this, but this injury thing was a big deal this year, a really big deal. Prevented us from winning games, prevented us from being competitive in games. And so we have to get a handle on that, I think, more than anything else.
You did say that you and the organization have some strengths and weaknesses and blank spots. What stands out as sort of weaknesses and blank spots?
Yeah,
in the current
I don't think I really want to get into the specifics of that. I'm just saying that in general, all of us, we have strengths and weaknesses. And so, you know, you have to marry up and be able to compensate for those things. You know, we talked about one right here. I'm maybe overly patient. So, you know, we have to have some people in here that are more, less patient, I guess.
You listed everyone.
Your
Proactive, let me say proactive as opposed to less patient.
You talked about being overwhelmingly positive. There's been a overwhelming negative aura around the season this year, and even towards you. I'm sure you're not, even though you probably don't pay attention to all of it, you obviously see it. Does it affect you, and maybe more on the human side too? I mean, you're ingrained in this community for 2 decades. You have kids that live here and stuff like that. Do you have to help them compartmentalize some of the things they see and hear?
I don't think too much. You know, look, people that I run into, fans, et cetera, they're generally positive with me. So the occasional negative attitude, that's just part of the job. You know, that's part of what we sign up for. And I try not to let it affect me. I don't think it affects my family too much. Yeah, so I wouldn't say that that's a big problem. But I understand it. Look, that's the advantage of having such a passionate, or that's the disadvantage to having such a passionate fan base, is that when things aren't going well, they're going to be passionate the other direction. I understand that. It's understandable.
Fans are frustrated. Like, what would you say to them that like don't have confidence in your direction? Like, why do you think? Why do you think you guys will get this right this time?
Yeah, because we've gotten it right before.
How would you assess Rizzy's job overall, given the circumstances?
Yeah, I think really tough circumstances. I think he did some really good things, and some things that yeah, I think he did a really good job under some really tough circumstances.
You said that you need to still take time to evaluate things, but based on his injuries as of the last 2 years, what is your confidence level in Derek Carr right now?
Yeah, I have high level of confidence in Derek. You know, listen, he did some really good things here. He has done some really good things here. I think, I mean, if he had qualified, which I'm not sure if he did, I mean, his quarterback rating would be in the top 10. His interception rating would be in the top 10. His yards per attempt would be in the top 10 under some really tough circumstances when you don't have, you know, your top 2 receivers, and you don't have that special weapon in Taysom Hill, and we don't have, the middle portion of our offensive line, and we have a rookie left tackle. There's some tough circumstances for a quarterback to deal with. So I think he's done a lot of really good things.
There are 5 openings right now in the NFL. What do you think makes this job a good job?
Yeah, I think there's a lot, well, first of all, look, we got the best professional sports league in the world, right? And there's 32 jobs, and a lot of guys want to be head coach. So every job is attractive. They just are, including ours. And we have a lot of things to offer. We have a great city, great fan base. We have great ownership. We have had stability in our building for a long, long time, and I think we're viewed that way.
When you mention that stability, not to mention any coaches specifically, but as you go through this process, there's some that you have extreme familiarity with, there's others that may be unknowns. How do you weigh that in the end, those that you may feel comfortable with versus those that may be uncomfortable?
Well, I just think there's probably less research you have to do with guys that you're familiar with, right? But that's not, we're gonna select the best candidate, and the advantage of having Dave and Randy and Jeff as part of the process is that that's a lot of experience in our league, and there's not many guys that they don't have a direct or an indirect experience with. So, we're going to take advantage. It's one of the things we can take advantage of.
What's your view on just kind of like rebuilding, peeling back a little bit, maybe starting over with a younger quarterback and like going back to the studs and building up from there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a circumstantial thing, right? So, it's not like we have the first pick of the draft. It's we're at 10, I think, as I recall right now. What are we? 9, excuse me. It was 10 before. That doesn't guarantee anything in the draft, and we haven't gone through the draft process. And so there's just I like what Spencer, like a lot of things that Spencer did during the season. I like Jay Keener, I like Derek. So we've got options. We've got things that we're going to evaluate, things that a new coach is going to have on his plate to evaluate, and then we'll have a collective vision.
The new coach will have like a large say in quarterback direction now, maybe in the future also. And in that same vein, the staffing, does the coach have a clean slate to hire whoever he wants?
Yes.
Like, is there anyone here that you're saying has to be part of that?
Nope. No, I believe in the head coach determining his staff, and absolutely.
And not blocking any lateral interviews at this point?
Yeah, here's what I've told our staff is that, look, they're all employed. They all have jobs here until a new coach comes in and makes his determination. If they have an opportunity for someplace else, then come see me and we'll discuss it, and we'll grant permission accordingly.
What goes into the decision?
Sorry, go ahead.
What goes into the decision for a guy like Clint Kubiak taking two interviews? It sounds like
Yeah.
with the Browns and the
Just
the
look, he's got an opportunity, like a lot of things that Clint did with us, but again, I don't want to block someone when I can't guarantee that they'll have an opportunity.
Derek said recently that he wouldn't take a pay cut if approached, but he has a $51 million cap hit. Would y'all be comfortable going into the season with him sitting at?
Yeah, I think all that needs to be, has yet to be determined.
How much progress do you feel like you can make this offseason when it comes to getting closer to being right with the salary cap following the COVID drop?
Yeah, I've seen that narrative out there. I think there's you can't just say, hey, here's the number, here's their over, and that's a disaster, right? We've got the most players under contract of any team. Yes, we're over, but there's a lot of teams below us that have, we've got 61 players under contract right now, and there's teams that have cap room, but they've got 38 or 36. So it's a collective. How much guaranteed is out there? How much is the acceleration that exists? Who are the players they have under contract? There's so many elements. I'm pretty comfortable with where we're at. I'm comfortably uncomfortable. So it's something we have to manage, but there's a lot of teams that have to manage their cap that way, and some of the ones that don't are going to have to at some point. So, I feel okay about where we're at. I think we're making progress from where we've been the last few years, so I'm feeling better about it.
You've spoken about the passion of the fans and,
Yeah.
the connection the city has to the team. How much, not organizationally, just personally for you, is this hiring, wanting to get things turned around and back in the right direction?
Yeah, look, I have a love for the community, right? A love for New Orleans. Wasn't originally from here, but I like to tell people I'm from here now. I know how much the success of our team impacts our city. So I take it personal when we're not successful. All of our guys take it personal. That's just part of, being in New Orleans. It kind of gets into your blood and gets into your soul. And so not having a successful season is painful. And so, look, I'm as determined as ever to let's get us back in the playoffs. Let's get us back on the right track here. And I think we can do that. I know I can do it. I know we can. It's not a matter of if, I know we can do it.
We've asked you before about, and you kiddingly say you're trying to run us off, you run me off. I mean, do you consider retirement ever? I mean, is that something
No.
ever, what keeps you going then?
Look, I got a passion for, I've got a passion for the sport. I got a passion for the Saints. I got a passion for all of it. I feel like, look, I've got all my faculties here. The only, nobody would ask me that question if I wasn't 68, right? They wouldn't ask me the question. Listen, you want to go out and challenge me to something? I'm ready to take you on, Jeff. Let's go. Not a fight. I'm not talking about that. I'm never been a great fighter, but if you want to play me golf, you want to play, if I ever felt like my acumen or my ability to think and ability to do the things necessary in this job were waning, I'd be the first guy to say, hey, wait a minute. So no, retirement's not on my mind. Get back to the playoffs and winning football, that's what's on my mind.
Does this season impact how you? Well, what about just the front office in general though? Do you anticipate making any changes there, whether it's scouting or?
Yeah, I think. Well, changes are like what? I mean, personnel changes. I mean, listen. We're always looking at. We've got some ideas about how we can do our processes a little differently. It's one of the advantages of having, Dave and Randy, who are kind of outside looking in, come in and say, hey, what about this? What about that? Why are you doing it this way? There's been some good dialogue and some good ideas that come out of that. Listen, I love Jeff Ireland and Michael Parrington in the roles that they have in our, both pro and college personnel areas. I think they do a fantastic job. So there's not going to be any changes in that regard. But there are going to be some discussions and some tweaks and some changes in terms of some of the things that we do because we're getting good input.
I know you haven't done a thorough evaluation of it, so you might not answer, but what did this season teach you about kind of the roster itself? I know injuries, but is it the types of players being injured?
Yeah, we haven't done a deep enough dive. It's, that's the area we need to look at and say, is this just coincidental, or are there things that we're not looking at closely enough? Like we had we had a lot of soft tissue injuries early in the season, and those are the things that you immediately think, well, there's things you can do to prevent that. And so I think that's probably the first place we start. We had a good experience though a year ago. It wasn't nearly as tough as it was this year. So again, that's just. Those are things we have to really look at hard and say, hey, how can we do a better job keeping our guys on the field?
Following up on the front office changes question, will the model be the same? Will a a new head coach be a head coach only underneath you, and there wouldn't be any like hiring? I think of, because they're a popular topic now, Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes together that work, like, they work for this existing front office and it's just a coach being hired, is that the idea?
Yeah. Yes.
You talked about,
And I was gonna say, speaking of front office decisions, how alarming is something like Zach Vaughn's season? And I know Trey Hendrickson's also first team All-Pro.
Yeah.
When two things like that happen in the span of a couple of years, how alarming is that?
Well, look, it's not something that you like, that's for sure. But I understand the circumstances behind it. Look, we tried to sign, Zach Vaughn, but he was looking for, opportunity to get more playing time, and under the last, system, that wasn't going to be as likely. So, look, I'm excited that we drafted those players, and they've had success. They were identified as talented players, but obviously it's not great when they go and have success someplace else. That hasn't happened a lot in our tenure here, but it does happen. And no different than when we get somebody from another team and they have success. Sometimes it's circumstantial. But no, when you draft good players, you want to keep them. Absolutely.
just a quick joke, you do have the height and reach on Jeff, so I'd probably take you in a fight.
But that's why I picked him out.
You talked about the new head coach's vision. If I could maybe ask specifically, I know last year you talked about Derek at this press conference finishing the season so strong, and DeMario being an all-pro at like 34,
Yeah.
and Cam being so good. Is your vision that this roster with these players can still be elite?
Yeah, again, that's part of the evaluation we have to do that we haven't done yet because we've been involved with going through these candidates, so I can't really answer that yet.
Theme last year's press conference was the culture of the team and wanted to kind of correct that. You feel like you got enough done toward that end this year, and is a new coach hire part of fostering that culture and building that?
I thought there were some things that collectively we did a lot better. A lot better. But I think that, look, any new coach is going to set the tone and define the vision for what the culture is going to look like for his team. And so that has yet to be determined.
Is there a type to the coach? Like, do you want a play caller, more of a culture builder?
You just want the best coach possible. And it's like I said, all of these candidates, all of them, they have strengths and weaknesses. And so I don't want to put anything into a box and say it's got to be this.
Half of the candidates that have been sort of confirmed so far are offensive coordinators. Is that because that's what the league produces, or you're very interested in exploring the idea of somebody, that calls their own plays and runs their own offense?
Yeah, half are offensive coordinators, so the other half are defensive coordinators and special teams coordinators, right? So, that's the candidate pool. You're looking at the best coaches available, and obviously they're going to have an expertise on one side of the ball or the other, or a special teams candidate, and so that's the pool.
Outside of maybe the new faces to the interview process, like what changes, if any, have y'all made to maybe the questions you ask, or how you do the coaching search to ensure that you get the right candidate this time?
Well, I just think by having, look, we did it 3 years ago, right? But we hadn't done it for however many years before that. It was a long time between times, so you learn something from it. I think having some new people, Randy and Dave and Michael Parrington. Well, actually, Michael was involved last time. You learn from the last process, and you get some input on from these other guys. And so I think it's similar, but there's probably a few more items that we're drilling down in that we didn't last time. But I can't tell you specifically. We asked, this particular question or that particular question last time, and we or this time, and we didn't last time. I thought it was pretty detailed last time.
do you have a rough time frame within which you would like to have a new coach? And also, do you anticipate training camp being back here?
Well, the timetable and time frame is dictated in part and mostly by, the league policies and rules that we have to adhere to, that we are adhering to. And some of these candidates are still involved in playing games, and so that'll dictate the timing. I'd say it's likely we're going to have training camp here, but that hasn't been made, that decision hasn't been made yet.
Is that something the new coach would have input into?
Yeah, absolutely.
How much does a new head coach change or impact, if at all, what you all do scouting-wise when it comes to the draft and everything, to prototypes, things like that?
Yeah, I think the main thing that you get from that might be different is, look, we want our coaches to define what they want their players to do at each position, and then it's up to our scouts to go find players that can do those things. The prototypes are the prototypes, that's just based upon what's playing in the league. But I think what's more important is, what do our coaches, what's their vision for what they want a particular player to do, and making sure our scouts understand that and are looking for players that do those things.
Going back to the front office, the way that the last 4 years had gone with missing the playoffs and the head coaching turnover, how much personal pressure do you feel to get this next head coach right?
Yeah, I feel pressure to do that all the time. I felt pressure last time, so that doesn't change. No one wants to win and be successful more than I do. We all do. That's the way everybody in our building feels like.
Was there I know the search ramped up in January after the season, but did you guys use like November, the final few months before the search at all? Like how did having that head start time kind of impact?
We look, our focus was on supporting Darren and Rizzy and our coaches and finishing out the season the best way we could. We did some in-house research on different people, but I would say most of our energy was spent on supporting our players and our staff that were playing.
I know there's been just some speculation about whether or not the organization would want to just completely move on from the entire Sean Payton era. Is that anything the organization prescribes to, where you just kind of want to?
Yeah, I'm not sure what that means, because
you went straight from Sean to Dennis, and
Yeah.
and it's been kind of the same sort of staff vision in place for the last 20 years around here. So.
Yeah, I don't know that I would agree with that. I understand the connection between Sean and Dennis, but we had a lot of different staff, changes, coaching changes. Look, two of the most successful turnarounds in recent times are Detroit and Denver. Well, both of those staffs are pretty well connected to New Orleans. So, I'm not sure what the criticism would be about, or understand what the, those are successful programs, right? That had a lot of basis here. So I'm not sure what that means necessarily.
Mickey,
We're going to get the best candidate we can get, whether they have a history with us or not.
What have your conversations with Gail Denson been like? How could you speak to where she stands right now in the state of affairs?
Well, she's like the rest of us, disappointed, frustrated. Wants the team to be successful. So she's been nothing but supportive and encouraging, and able to provide as many resources as we need to get the best coach we can get. So she's a big positive when the question comes up about why is this job attractive.
Following up on Luke's question, when you look back in hindsight, do you wish the last time you had a coaching search there was more? It made sense at the time, but obviously you said things like, we don't have a problem with our culture here, we're happy with how things are going. this isn't like firing a coach and trying to change everything. Do you wish there had maybe been more of a significant break or change at that time?
I think if anything, maybe I underestimated a couple of different items. I don't want to get into the detail of that. I think I could have probably done a better job supporting Dennis in a few areas. But I don't want to get specific as to what those are.
The general
No, that's
concept of what that
Nothing
means, or
specific.
like with the roster or with any?
Just lots of different things, really, that we could have done better. That maybe we underestimated.
In that same vein, like, were there some, obviously it seems like there were some learning lessons that you think will maybe help you this time, like going into it, knowing what to look for, knowing the blind spots?
Yeah, there are some things that we'll do better, absolutely.
Like two different staffs, but when you talk about a deep dive into the injury issues, when you also own a basketball team that has had the same issues, if not worse.
Yeah.
Do you have to kind of look and see if there's a connection between the two, even though there's different personnel in those areas?
Yeah. I've had a couple conversations with David about, man, let's put our heads together, let's put our groups together, and let's figure out, is there something in common that we're not doing? David's like, hey, we need to check the water. And he's being facetious there. But I think it's coincidental. But if they can come up with something and we can come up with something, then look, those are areas we got to look at. But I do believe it's coincidental.
I know, obviously, one hire has been made with New England, and you see Mike Brinkman today. As dominoes start to fall, would that alter your process and make you change it if you felt like we got to have our guy before somebody else gets him? Or would you say our process is our process and the cards are going to be unfolded the way they unfold?
That's a good question. And I would say that, look, we're gonna follow the process, and I think sometimes if you feel undue pressure to make a quick decision, that's generally where you make mistakes. So we're gonna follow our process. We're gonna follow the rules and the hiring practices that the league has determined, and then we'll hire the right guy.
What will you gain when in-person interviews start to where everything now is just virtual? How does that process differ?
I think it's just detail, and there's more. I feel like the Zoom calls that we've done have been pretty good, but excuse me, we're not asking coaches to study and know our roster inside and out. They've got jobs to do. They're in season, so we're not asking them to do those sorts of things and those kinds of discussions that what we would have in an in-depth in-person interview. So it's just more detail is really what it comes down to.
Do you expect there to be, or will there be any baseline common attributes in all the candidates?
Well, they'll be good football coaches. That's the baseline.
Saturday, that might have been outside the box. I don't know.
Yeah.
Experience. Are you open to anything, or do you feel like there's
I think we're open to anything. We've talked a lot about where successful of coaches have come from. The offensive coordinator pool, the former head coach pool, the college coach pool. There's these different buckets, if you will, of where candidates have come from. We've discussed the success rates and the successes that each pool has had. So we're looking at all of them.
How much will coaching experience factor in at that point? Like if one coach has had a lot of success in a small amount of time compared to another coach who's had moderate over a longer period of time?
Yeah, I mean, look, you definitely want to have coaches that have had success, but how are you measuring that? Are you measuring that in wins, or are you measuring it in statistics, development of players. There's lots of different there's lots of different things to look at when you're looking at all these head coaches. So we're looking at all of it.
If you were selling this job to a potential candidate, like what would you tell them if they asked why this would be an attractive job?
Yeah, I don't really think we have to do that.
I guess a better question is, would you like?
Yeah, we're not recruiting, we're interviewing, and they're interviewing us. So it's a matter of right fit. It's not. I don't think selling is the right. I don't think we need to do that. We can answer questions certainly, and there's going to be questions about how, each coach, each candidate is going to have things that are important to them, and they're going to want to understand, those things from us, and we'll answer those. We'll be transparent, and it'll be the right thing to do is not try to sell. The right thing to do is kind of lay out what you are, what your vision is, on both sides, and make sure that those we can have a collective vision. That's how we're going to be successful. It's not going to be about selling.
Well, time for 2 or 3 more questions. Cameron's pretty outspoken about not liking that he had to play defensive tackle. What did you just make of his season and his role and?
Yeah, I think. Look, that's a coaching. That's a coaching item there, right? Cam's played for us and been a fantastic player, a fantastic person. He just won that Bart Starr Award. That's a fantastic honor. I'm really proud of him. He's a good player. He's been a good player for such a long time that I didn't see those comments, so I can't really speak to those exact comments. But I know that he felt better about his role toward the end of the season than he did in the middle and the beginning of the season.
When you identify, when you start the process, how do you go about identifying your candidates? You use outside resource. I know, like in the past, the league would help you all identify some. Do you have maybe a outside resource that would help, or is it mainly just you all in your inner circle?
No, I think this time around in particular, we've just got such a broad spectrum of experience that we know the names. Everybody knows the names. Everybody knows the coaches that are in our league, that have been in the league, former coach. We know who those people are. So we don't really have any problem identifying who the candidates are. And then we can do our own research. So we haven't relied on any outside resources. Well, look, I'll talk to, let me rephrase that. We will talk to people outside the building who have experience with a particular candidate, right? Hey, what do you think about, how was he, kind of style does he have? Those types of questions with a lot of people outside the building. So we've had a lot of contact, but we haven't used a search firm or anything like that, if that's what you're asking.
Do you expect to add any more candidates to the request or interview list this week?
Possible.
Mike McCarthy's contract is expiring in Dallas.
I'm not going to speak to any individuals.
A couple of things you said at this time last year were that y'all had let the standard slip and that y'all needed a jolt of energy and enthusiasm, and it was your responsibility to lead in both those efforts. How do you think you and the organization have done over the last year on those two?
I think there were some improvements. I think our coaches, I think our players took a lot of things, particularly the player leadership, took a lot of things to heart, and improved in that area. But we need to improve more. Yeah.
How much did dead money hits factor into your decisions on whether to keep a player or let a player go?
There's some. I don't know that it affects ultimately the decision. It just affects, hey, how do we handle it? How do we manage it? I don't think it doesn't determine that we're going to keep or let someone go. It just determines how we manage the rest of it.
Is there ever a point like where a number's so big though that it's just, you know, we can't take $40 million, we can't take $30 million, like?
It hasn't been yet, but there's some big numbers occasionally, yeah, that you have to go through, hey, how do we handle this if we're going to take on that particular number? But again, that's, you know, there's a bunch of teams in that position, and there's going to be a bunch more. You're either in it or you're going to be in it at some point, or you're just never spending any money. But
How do you feel about kind of the resources that you have, like the number of draft picks, the cap?
Yeah. Oh, I'd always take more draft picks if we could get them. But look, I like where we're at, and I like our history of drafting too. I think we've got a really good history of drafting. Again, you know, when you have a new coaching staff, now you've got to, you know, recalibrate and adjust, not the evaluation process, but what you're looking for. And so that's going to be a lot of work, you know, once we get a coaching staff hired, to make sure that we're on the same page relative to the types of players, not the types, but the things that they want their players to do, and making sure that we're bringing guys that can do what they need.
Guys, maybe a philosophical question again. You know, sometimes.
Hasn't this been all philosophical?
I know, like in therapy, they say, you know, admitting a problem is the first step in fixing a problem.
Yeah.
Is 5 and 12 and firing coach, is that admitting a problem and saying we have to fix
Yeah,
it?
that's admitting a problem, absolutely. But that isn't just the coach. You know, that's, hey, we got to look at ourselves. You know, I got to look at the way, you know, I'm operating, and I got to look at the way that all of us in football operations are operating, all the way down to, like I said, the injury issue, right? You know, all the things that contribute to a successful program, you have to evaluate and make sure that it doesn't mean, by the way, because the results aren't what we want, doesn't mean that we're doing something wrong. There may be some circumstantial things here, but we have to look at all of it and be honest with ourselves. Hey, we didn't do a good job in that area. We got to do better. How can we do better? What are the specific things that we can address?
You push back against the idea that the roster is getting too old. Do you still feel that way, that you guys are in a good spot in terms of just the overall age?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that I kind of look at the other end of it as, man, we've got a lot of young players that have done some good things. Look, the injuries are a bad problem, right? And yet the other side of that is we got to see a lot of young guys play, and they got thrown into the fire. And you know, it's like taking your 3-year-old and just throwing them in the pool and seeing if they swim. Some of them swam, and some of them you had to go pull out of the pool. So, I think we've got a lot of young players that I'm excited about. That's a long-winded way of saying that, I guess.
Sorry, sometimes you say you got to look past the numbers. What did you see positive in Spencer Rattler as the season went on?
Yeah, look, he did some really good things. You can see the arm talent. You can see the processing talent that he has. He made a lot of rookie mistakes that you expect. Wasn't ever. I didn't feel like there was panic in his play. I felt like there was a lot of good things that are probably not visible to the naked eye, but positive about some of the things that he did. So we'll see if we can build on that.
Ryan Ramczyk just redid his contract similar to Drew Brees before he retired. Would there be any timetable to that, or making that decision?
Yeah, I think that that'll happen over the next few months. But that's kind of his call.
Now that you have a little bit of the benefit of hindsight, how do you feel now looking back at the Marshawn Lattimore trade in terms of the return that you've gotten?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what we do with it, right? It was just something that was necessary for us, probably necessary for him too, and look, we're rooting for Marshawn. I don't have any ill will. He was a really good player for us, defensive rookie of the year, right? Did a lot of really good things. So wish him nothing but the best. All right. Thank you all. See you in Mobile.